This is the Admin 101 session with Chessie Alleman, your technical trainer with DocuSign University, presenting. Take it away, Chessie.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Admin 101 session. For those of you that have attended some of the other trainings with me, you'll likely remember my voice, but for those of you who have not attended, my name is Chessie Alleman, and I am a technical trainer here at DocuSign. Now, just as a reminder, this training is a part of a training series. So by now we have gone through these 3 courses in our foundational trainings. And then today we're going to be going through Administration 101. Now, in addition to the foundational trainings, remember you'll also have those working sessions that you can get scheduled between Carrie and Jesse, your professional services team here at DocuSign, where you can work through any questions that you have, as well as perhaps even walk through a number of different use cases that you might want to experiment with. Now, I will be sending, or Carrie will be sending out the slide deck as well as the recording after today's class if you miss anything or want to go back and review any of the details. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how you can interact with me during class. Because we are using Zoom, feel free to send in your questions at any point in time through the chat. You don't need to wait until the end of a topic or the end of the lesson, just send them in whenever. And then additionally, if you have a question that you want to ask out loud, please feel free to raise your hand in Zoom from the reactions menu. That way I have a heads up that we're both going to be unmuted, and that way we're not talking over one another throughout class. Now I want to walk through our learning objectives. So our session is going to be split up into 2 different parts. Part 1, before the break, will cover setting up your account. So going through some of the basic details of configuring your account profile, your regional settings, security settings, as well as branding. Then we'll go into managing users as well as establishing permissions. Then we'll take a quick little break and we'll come back and we'll walk through these objectives. So we'll talk about sharing and transferring envelopes on the account between users, configuring some additional administrative settings like legal disclosures and reminders and expirations. And then we'll wrap up with discussing retention for documents, reporting, and even some automation tactics. Now, I do want to mention that you all have demo accounts, and I believe everyone is an admin, so you should be able to see a lot of the settings that I'm going through in class in your demo account. But because it is a shared demo account that you're all using, I just want to issue a word of caution as it relates to changing settings around. Just be aware that if you change a setting or a function, that will impact everyone else on the demo account. So maybe you want to communicate internally as to who might be adjusting certain things. But again, I just wanted to set that precedent before we get into some of our demonstrations. So with that, we'll go ahead and just jump right into a tour of navigation. Now you can access your admin settings from the settings tab in the top navigation. And once you click on settings, you'll be taken to this page here. Now, just as a disclaimer, we actually just visually refreshed this page last week. So it does look a little bit different in the application than it does on this slide. All of the functionality is the same. It's just the layout of the page is a little bit different. But just to walk through some of the functions that you'll see here in admin. At the top, we have the little question mark icon where you can find various support resources with DocuSign. So you can open up our help site to search for articles and guides. On the right-hand side, we have the notification banner where you can see product release announcements or enhancement notes and even events that you can register for within the past 90 days. As an admin, it might be a good idea to come up to this section every 30 days or so, just so you're keeping on track or keeping abreast of some of the enhancements that occur in the product. In the middle of the page, we have some quick links. So you can easily search for a specific user on your account. You can search for a specific setting. This is, I find, to be really helpful as opposed to remembering the breadcrumbs for where a specific setting lives. You can search for it here and then go right to the page. There are also some quick links as well for some of our more popular areas in admin. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll easily be able to find your account name and your account number. Now, the reason I point this out is because you may need to contact DocuSign support when you're using DocuSign if you have product questions or need technical assistance. And one of the first things they'll ask you when you're contacting support is for the name of your account and your account number. So remember, you can always find that information here in your admin settings, quite handy. Down the left-hand side, you'll find the navigation. So there are many different tabs that you can click into to find various settings. Throughout our class, we'll be clicking into lots of different tabs here to expose some of the different settings. I also want to talk a little bit about the difference between DocuSign Admin and eSignature Admin. Now, your account may have DocuSign Admin enabled. If it does, you'll be able to switch to DocuSign Admin by clicking on this little calculator dot looking icon in the upper left-hand corner. Essentially, DocuSign Admin allows you to manage multiple e-signature accounts under one umbrella account. So this is helpful if you have things like single sign-on, or if you're going to be leveraging other DocuSign products like contract lifecycle management or insights. Versus eSignature Admin is going to allow you to manage the account settings for a single eSignature account. So again, today's course is going to focus on eSignature Admin, but if you have DocuSign Admin, you could manage multiple accounts under a single umbrella account. Now, with all of that being said, let's jump in and take a look at some of the account setup settings. In this section, we'll talk about your account profile, the regional settings, your security settings, and your branding. So let's start with the account profile. The account profile tab is where you'll be able to customize account-wide information that will impact all of your users. So one of the first things that we can customize here is your account name. Now, your account name will probably just be the name of your school. It will be whatever was on your sales contract when you signed up with DocuSign. But if for whatever reason you ever need to change your account name, you can. Now, your account name will impact the backend experience for your users, so they'll be able to see the new account name when they're logged in. And the account name will also show up for your recipients when they're signing envelopes that you send them. So typically what we see with some of the schools that we work with is for the account name, if you're in your demo account, maybe you actually want to change the account name to say University of Central Florida demo account versus just University of Central Florida. That way you have a really key distinction between your demo environment and your production environment. Another setting that you have the ability to customize in your account profile is the account address. Now, this is primarily used for billing purposes. This will be where all of the invoices are sent from DocuSign to your school. So you can probably just make this the main address for your school's office. But if for whatever reason that changes, you can come in here and update that. The account address will also be displayed on any certificates of completion that are downloaded for envelopes in your account. Another thing that you can customize in the account profile is the admin custom message. You can use this as a way to communicate with your users on your account. If you enable a custom message, you can type in a notice banner text as well as a custom message. Then what happens is that notice text will become a banner at the top of the page for all of your users when they log in. So a lot of times clients will use this as a way to communicate updates or policy updates or procedural updates to your user base. So that way when they log in, they see it right away. We'll of course take a look at how that appears from the end user perspective so you can have clarity from that end. Lastly, in the account profile, you can add in a custom help contact. So your users can, of course, always contact DocuSign support if they need product assistance, but there may be times where your users have questions that are better suited for an administrator. For example, which template should I use for which use case? Or how do I, access help if I need procedural help from the school point of view? You can provide your information as an administrator here. You can type in a message, name, email address, and even a phone number. And that appears when your users click on the question mark icon in the application. They'll be able to, of course, see DocuSign support, but also your support information. The next thing that we'll briefly talk about are email preferences. So when you are in your administrative settings, you have the ability to determine when your users will be notified in certain situations, if they're sending envelopes versus they are receiving envelopes to sign. So as an admin, you can set up the default email notification preferences for all of your new users. Now, of course, when a user gets added to the account, they'll be able to customize their own preferences from the profile icon and then selecting preferences. So maybe they don't want to be notified in all of the situations that you've enabled by default. They can customize that once they get logged in. Now, what events notifications are triggered for, we'll see when we go into the system shortly. So let's take a look at the account profile options and the email preferences. I'm going to pull up my DocuSign account. You can see here I'm on the home page. Again, I know I'm in my demo account because of this blue bar that says developer environment. Additionally, in my web address in my browser, it says appdemo.docusign.com. So those are two keys for me to know I'm in the right place. Now to get to my admin settings, I'll select settings. And here we are on the admin homepage once this loads. Now, right away, we can see that the layout is a little bit different from what I showed on the slide. Again, we did have a small visual refresh there, but most of the functionality is the same. You can see I have the ability to quickly search for a setting. For example, if I start to type in a word, I can easily be linked to a particular section. I can search for a user. For example, if I type in Quinn and click search, I can go right to this person's profile. I can see some notifications for different releases that have occurred. For example, right here, the new admin release that just happened, or maybe that's not the one, but there was a new admin release that just came out a couple of days ago that might not have been published just yet. But again, this is a great place to go just to make sure that you're keeping on top of some of the updates that occur. We also have some helpful resources here. You can access our learning management portal, the knowledge market, the help center, etc. Then the navigation is going to exist over here on the left-hand side. So you can scroll through and click on any of these different tabs. So let's start in account profile. Here we can see our account name. So I can easily click edit. And if I wanted to, I could maybe write sandbox at the end just to let my users know and remind everyone that this is a sandbox account. Again, this account name will update the backend experience. You can see here in the upper left, my account name is displaying. It also will show up during the signing process for my recipients. Scrolling down, there's that admin custom message. So if I wanted to enable a custom message, I could type out the notice text. This is what will appear in the banner. And I could type in a custom message, which will appear after the notice text has been clicked. So maybe I want to say important account update and then maybe put the date, September 7th. There are new templates available for use. Please contact me if you need access. Again, you could use this for any number of messaging situations. We'll take a look at how that appears from the end user perspective in a minute. Lastly, or second to last on this page, we have the custom help contact. So this is again where you could plug in your information as an admin if you want to make it available to your users if they need help. And you can add a message to provide context. So I'm saying, please contact your admin for account specific questions. Down below, we have the account address. So again, this is primarily used for billing purposes on your account, but this will also appear in the certificates of completion that you download for your envelopes. I'm just going to click save on all of my changes. And before we take a look at the end user perspective, I want to point out the email preferences. So from the side navigation, if I select email preferences under signing and sending, this is again where as an administrator, I have the ability to determine the default email preferences for all of my new users that get added. So when will they be notified if they are a recipient or a signer? Versus when will they be notified if they are a sender or a person who is sending an envelope from DocuSign? I would say as a best practice, it might make sense to keep all of these selected by default, especially when you're adding people to the account who may not know how to use DocuSign in all of its potential just yet. That way people are being notified in every situation, and then they can turn on or off notifications per their preferences, which I'll show you in a moment. So from the end user perspective, if I briefly just click home, you can see that at the top, right away on the home page, here's the admin custom message. If I click on it, then I see the notice text. Also, if I click on the support icon here, I see the DocuSign support links, but I also see that custom help contact. Now, if I wanted to adjust my email notification preferences as a user, I can click on my profile and then preferences. And one of the options on the side is notifications. And here I can see I can choose when I want to be notified when I am a sender versus when I am a recipient. So your users will always have the ability to adjust these preferences. So coming back here, let's now talk a little bit about regional settings. So as an administrator, you have the ability to determine the default time zone and date and time format for the account. Now, why is this important? Well, the time zone and the date and time format will impact things like your envelope historical data. So every time you send out an envelope, there's a timestamp that gets recorded for lots of the different events that go into the envelope's life cycle. For example, when it was sent, when it was signed, when it was completed, etc. So as an admin, that time zone will impact that data for your envelopes. Now, you can always come in and customize the time zone for the account if you need to. For example, maybe your office changes. That will update any of your envelope historical data. So if you were to go back and look at an envelope that you sent previously, after you updated the time zone or the date format, the envelopes would now have that new format for any of the timestamps. What will not automatically change is any certificates of completion. So if you changed your time format, for example, and you went into a certificate for an envelope, it will keep and honor the original time format. It won't retroactively update on the account. Now, if you have people that are located throughout the country or internationally, you can also allow your users to set their own time zone and date format preferences. For example, maybe you're headquartered on the East Coast, but you have one or two users that are maybe working remotely in the Central time zone or on the Pacific time zone. They might prefer to see data in their own time format. We'll also talk a little bit about some account security settings. So one of the first security settings that I want to mention is the account timeout. So by default, when you set up your DocuSign account, there is a timeout in place of 20 minutes. What that means is when you or any of your users are working in DocuSign, if they deviate from the page or if they are idle on the page for 20 minutes, DocuSign will automatically log them out. And that's really for your benefit, right? It makes sense for security reasons to not have sensitive information up on the screen idle for long periods of time. So you can keep the timeout at 20 minutes if you wish, or you can update it to be anywhere from 1 minute, which is pretty extreme, all the way up to 120 minutes of idle time. Now, as a best practice, what we've seen with a lot of schools is in your production account where you're mainly probably just handling, demo or test information, you can maybe up the timeout to be closer to 120 just for ease of use. But in your production account where you might be handling more sensitive information or real data, you might want to keep that timeout closer to 20 minutes or whatever is the guidance of your security team. Now, there's also authentication. So as an admin, you have the ability to determine if you would like to use authentication on the account. So there are a couple of different settings here that you can customize. First, there are recipient authentication settings. So here is where you can determine when authentication should be used. Just as a reminder, I think everyone on here has attended our previous classes, but authentication basically requires that a recipient, when they're sent an envelope, authenticate or prove their identity prior to accessing an envelope's contents. So here, as an admin, you can say that any recipient must authenticate on every envelope sent from your account. Maybe it's up to the sender to require that a recipient must authenticate, or do we want to disable authentication entirely? Now, I would say maybe the middle option is what's most common in my experience, just because at that point you're leaving it up to the sender. You're not turning it off completely and you're not requiring it for every transaction that's being sent. You can also determine the triggers for authentication. So this is how often authentication will be required. Is it the first time that someone accesses an envelope per device, or is it every time that someone accesses an envelope? You can also determine that if a recipient is being sent subsequent envelopes from the same sender, if they should be able to skip authentication in that case. No, or yes, they can, but only if it's sent within a certain time frame. Now, these authentication settings are going to apply to phone authentication, SMS authentication, which is text message authentication, as well as knowledge-based authentication. These settings will not apply to the access code authentication method. Lastly, you have the ability to determine if you would like to be notified if your account only has one administrator. Now, this setting is turned on by default, and I would recommend keeping it on. The reason being, if your account only has one active admin and you log in, you'll be notified and prompted to designate another admin user. We always recommend having at least 2 administrators to prevent any bottlenecking should someone be out of the office or lose access to the account. You always want to have a backup admin option. Some other settings that I want to hit on before we go back in for a demo include access codes and password rules. So let's talk a little bit about access codes first. Remember that access codes are an authentication method that is free for you to use, as opposed to knowledge-based, text message, and phone call. Those 3 have a pay-per-use fee tied to them. Access codes, on the other hand, are free. And remember, with access codes, you would assign an access code to a recipient. You would be responsible for communicating that code to them offline, and then they would have to enter that code in correctly in order to access the envelope. So as an admin, you have the ability to set rules for access code formatting. You can determine a certain number of characters that need to be included in an access code, as well as if access codes should include certain components like letter casing, numbers, or characters. We also have an access code generator that you can leverage that would basically have DocuSign generate a code for you, for your users when they're using access codes. And that would obviously comply with the rules that you set up. The other thing that we'll hit on is password rules. So this allows you as an administrator to set the password rules for your users when they are creating passwords to log in. A couple of things that you can set up here include password strength requirement. So you can have it set as a basic, medium, or strong requirement. Or you can go custom, meaning that you are going to set all of the rules yourself. For example, how long the password should be and what components should be included in a password. There's also the option to set up a password expiration. For example, maybe you would like your users to have to reset their password every 60 days or so. You can set up that expiration policy. Now, if your account is using SSO either now or in the future, these password rules will not be relevant because your users will be authenticating from an external system, not through DocuSign. So let's take a look at the regional settings and the security settings. Coming back to my account here, we'll go up to the admin settings again. And from the side, we will start in regional settings. So from here, this is where I can set up the default time zone for my account, as well as the date and time format. So maybe my school is located on the West Coast in Seattle. I'm going to keep my time zone as Pacific. And maybe all of our users are located in Seattle. We don't have users located in other time zones. So I don't want someone to mistakenly change their time zone and then be confused. I can actually uncheck this option to allow users to set their own time zone and date format preferences. Now they'll have to use what I've set up on the account. Down below, there are also some settings that relate to the date signed field. We've seen the date signed field quite a few times in other trainings that I've done with this group. Remember, the date signed field just pulls in the date that the recipient is signing. So as an admin, you can determine for that field what language is used for the month name, if the month is being spelled out, and what time zone should be used if the time is included in the date signed field. Should it always go based off of what is default in the account as denoted above? Or should it be based off of the recipient's local time zone and local language settings in their browser? We'll now jump over to security settings. So if I select security settings, here I can see the first thing I can control at the top is the timeout limit. So you have the ability to control the timeout separately for the web application, which is basically just www.docusign.com in your browser. The recipient signing session, so when your recipient is signing a document, and the mobile application. So DocuSign does have a mobile app that you can download. You can log in using your same credentials, and you can send, sign, and manage envelopes on the go. So as an admin, you can control the timeout separately for each of these areas. Again, with your production account, we might recommend keeping the timeout a little bit more strict, but with your demo account where you're handling fake data, you might want to up the timeout for ease of use. Scrolling down, we have those authentication settings. So recipient authentication settings, I can determine when authentication is going to be used. Is it on every envelope sent from my account? Is it up to the sender to require it? Or am I disabling it entirely? Again, these settings only are going to apply to the knowledge-based authentication, the phone call authentication, and the text message authentication, not to the access code authentication. The triggers, so when or how often authentication will be required, the first time they access an envelope per device or every time. And then can they skip if they are being sent subsequent envelopes from the same sender? And if I do want them to be able to skip, then I can determine the time frame. So if they're sent another envelope in 30 minutes, for example, they won't have to authenticate again. Coming down towards the bottom, we have our access code settings. So I'm choosing to enforce access code rules, and I can determine what those rules are. So how long do the access codes need to be? Anywhere from 6 to 50 characters. What components do my codes need to include? Maybe at least one number and one letter. And I can also turn on that code generator, which will allow DocuSign to automatically generate a code for my users. Now, this may not be turned on for your account, but this is something that you can get added to your account by contacting DocuSign support. I would say if you're interested in the access code generator, that would be a great thing to bring up during those working sessions with Carrie and Jesse. They can talk you through the pros and cons of that function. Now at the bottom, we have our password rules. So if I click show password rules, this is where I can determine how passwords are to be created on my account. What is the strength requirement is the first thing, basic, medium, strong, or custom. If I choose basic, medium, or strong, there are preset requirements here. If none of those meet my needs, I can go custom, and that's where I can set up the requirements. Minimum password length, minimum password age, so meaning that the user would not be able to update their password multiple times within a given time frame. And then, of course, what components are going to be included for each password. Here's that password expiration as well. So you can set the lifetime for each password, for example, 60 days or 90 days maybe. Now, as a reminder, if your account is using SSO, this page will not be relevant to password rules since people are authenticating from a third-party application. And of course, always remember to save your changes at the bottom. So now let's talk a little bit more about branding. Let's move on here. So you can create brands on your account to customize what your recipients and your users will see when they interact with your DocuSign account. So you could add in your own logo and color schemes so that it's displayed in the email notifications that are sent to your recipients and to your users in the e-signature application when they log in. So there are technically two different types of brands that you can set up. There's a signing brand, which is going to be visible to your recipients when they're signing envelopes. You can use a signing brand to really reinforce your brand presence for your recipients, as opposed to using the generic DocuSign branding. You can also use a signing brand to even direct people to a specific site after they finish signing. For example, after someone is done signing, maybe they should be directed to your school's homepage versus the regular DocuSign landing page. You can set up multiple signing brands as well. For example, maybe the signing brand needs to be different for your general school versus the athletics department. And we'll see that in action later today. Now, on the other hand, we have sending brands. A sending brand allows you to basically brand the back-end DocuSign interface for your users on your account. So you can add in your logo and your colors to really make your DocuSign account feel more like another website that your users might be using at your school. Now, an important thing to distinguish is your account can only have one sending brand, as opposed to signing brands where you can create multiple. So again, with sending brands and really just brands in general, your school probably has a marketing department that you can work with to get access to the specific colors and logos that you'll use when setting up either of these brand types. Today, I'm going to be using a fictitious school called ABC University. You can see their school colors are blue, black, and white. So we'll be adding those branding colors into our account. So let's jump in and take a look at setting up some brands. I'm going to pull up my DocuSign account here, and I'm already in my admin settings. I'll select brands from the side navigation. So let's start with the sending brand first. If I select sending at the top, here I can see that I'm currently using the default DocuSign branding. And again, what that means is really quick, if I go back to my home page, you can see all of my colors and my logo are going to reflect that default branding. So that dark blue, the yellow, and then the DocuSign logo. Now, if I come back up to DocuSign settings and I select brands again, we'll customize our sending brand here. So if I click edit my theme, here I have the ability to upload the logos and change the colors. Now for the logos, we do have some image requirements and suggestions. You can hover over this hyperlink to see what some of them are. And I can click upload logo for both the sending logo and the email logo. So the sending logo is what's going to appear in your account versus the email logo is what's going to appear when you send out emails to your users. And again, there are different size recommendations for both. Now, scrolling down, I'll also need to take a look at my colors. I can click into each color section and choose from the color palette or type in a hex value of my choosing. There's also this little eyedropper tool, which allows you to upload an image, for example, the logo, and then use the little eyedropper tool to locate a color in the picture. So maybe I'm going to go with that light blue. Now, DocuSign's also really smart. We'll let you know if there are any conflicts with resolution on your colors. You don't want to have dark text on a dark background or light text on a light background. So the white text is probably too light to have with this light blue. So I'm going to update the text here to be black, and notice that little warning goes away. I might also want to update my action button to be more reflective of my school. So I'll do dark blue. And maybe I'll do white text on the button. And again, you can of course play around with this to find what best, what looks best or what, pleases the most people on the account. So here in the middle, we can obviously see a preview. We can look at the home page, what it would look like from the manage page, and what it would look like from an email notification if we're adding someone to the account, for example. So once I click apply brand, my theme will be saved. There's also the ability for me to add some advanced components to the sending brand, for example, header and footer links. If I open that, I have the option to type in different links that will appear in the header and the footer of my account for my users. So a lot of times you could use this to link to your school's website for easy access, or maybe to a help page that you have created on your school's intranet that has DocuSign frequently asked questions, for example. Really just any links that you think might be helpful for your users to have. For example, I've plugged in a couple of footer links just to show you. If I go to my home page, just to show you again what that would look like, first things first, we'll be able to see that our branding has been updated on the home page. And if we scroll down to the bottom, just to show you, here's where some of those footer links would appear. So I can link them to my website and maybe a help page that I've created for DocuSign questions. So that's sending brands. Again, you can only have one sending brand on your account at a time. Let's now take a look at signing brands. So back in the brands page, we'll keep signing selected. So remember, signing brands are going to be applied to the signing process, and this is what your recipients will see when they are signing. And you can have multiple signing brands to reflect your different brands or your different subsidiaries or even schools within your university. In our case, we already have a general ABC University brand set up, but I want to walk through creating a new brand specifically for our athletics department. So anytime I'm sending out envelopes to spectators or athletes or coaches, I always want the athletics department branding to be applied. To add a new brand, I'll simply click Add Brand at the top, and I can give it a name. So I'm going to call this ABC Athletics brand. I'll click Save, and now I'll be taken into the page where I can update the branding. So first, I can add in a company name. This company name will appear in the legal disclosure configuration if I'm using this particular brand during the signing process. So maybe I want this to be more reflective of the athletics department. I might write ABC University Athletics. You can also choose to use the sender's company name. So remember, all of your users on your account can update their company name as a part of their profile over here. So if you wanted the brand, the company name to always reflect what's set up in the sender's preferences, you could check off this box. I could make this my default brand. So when I go to create a template or when I go to send an envelope, the default brand will be what is applied right away. I'm not going to do that for this one. And then I can get to the theming. So if I click Create Theme, here I can do the same thing as we saw with the sending brand. I can upload my pictures and my colors and preview how this would look during the signing process from a Power Form and from the email notifications. So I'm going to upload a logo here for the signing logo. I'm going to do the ABC University Athletics logo, slightly different. And then I'll go ahead and upload an email logo as well, a slightly smaller version. I'll go ahead and customize the colors. So I'll make the header color, and I'm going to do the eyedropper again and get that green. So I'll add the logo and then select that green. And again, I'll want to update the text so that it has a good amount of contrast. So maybe I'll do black text. For my button, maybe I'll go with that royal blue and then update the button text to be white. Again, you always want to have dark and light contrast. So again, I can preview how that looks throughout the different areas just to make sure that it looks good. I'll go ahead and click Apply Brand. Now down here, there are some more advanced components as well. We can add in our destination URLs. So if I open that up, for any of these 6 events, you can add a destination URL to direct your recipients to. For example, when they finish the signing process or when they click Finish Later, if they need to come back to the signing process, you can direct them to a different page. Now you can see right in here, there are some DocuSign default landing pages, so you don't technically need to do anything here. But if you want to direct your recipients to maybe your athletics website or your schedule page for your athletics, you certainly can. I'll go ahead and just plug in a basic website here. I'm going to do DocuSign.com. We also have the ability to update the header and footer links. So with this, these header and footer links will appear during the signing process. So you can customize the links and maybe add in links to your school's website or your school's athletic page. Again, these will be available to your recipients when they are signing. There are some DocuSign header links that appear by default, but you can always click to hide those if you do not want the DocuSign generic links to appear. Coming back to our brand, there was the option to select brand languages. So if you are going to be having signers who are going to be signing in different languages, you can potentially keep all of these languages selected. But if you maybe only wanted your brand to be available with specific languages, you could come in here and pick and choose. I would say most of the clients I work with keep all of the languages selected for all of their signing brands, just because you never know what language someone might need when they're signing. But again, there is the possibility to include or exclude certain languages, as well as determine what the default language is. Lastly, down at the bottom, there's resource files. So if you are an XML expert or you know how to work with HTML code, you can do more advanced customizations to the brand than what we've seen out of the box. I would say if you're curious about the resource files and potentially have an expert on your team that wants to help with that, that could be a great thing to bring up to Carrie and Jesse during a working session. But for now, I have this brand, I've saved it. If I come back to my brands page, here I have two signing brands, my athletics and my regular ABC University brand. Now, when I go to create a template or maybe send an envelope, I can pick and choose which brand I would like to leverage. Now, if you ever need to edit the brand, you can click the ellipses next to each brand and click edit. There's also the option to export a brand. So when you create a signing brand, you can then export it to your computer as an XML file. The reason I mention that is because there is an upload option in the upper corner. So a lot of times what clients will do is they'll build out their signing brands in their demo account, practice with some fake transactions, and then once it's set up and set in stone, you can export from demo, get that XML file, and then in your production account, you can upload the brand instead of having to recreate completely from scratch. So now that we have these two signing brands, I want to show you what it would look like when I go to create a template, for example. So if I go to my templates page, and I click new, create template, I'm just going to call this test. I'll go ahead and add in a document. Now, if I want to choose the brand for this template, I can go to advanced options in the upper right-hand corner. And here we can see all of our familiar advanced options that we went over in previous classes. But down below, now I can also see branding. So I can say if this is going to be regular ABC University or athletics. Then if I want to lock down this brand and prevent it from being modified by other users on my account, remember we have those template modification options. And one of them is to not allow senders to edit the brand assignment. So again, that might be a best practice if you want to potentially prevent changes to the brand assignment from other users on your account. Just going to discard this template. All right, so that was pretty much it for branding. Before we move on to user management, I just want to pause and see if there are any questions. Feel free to come off mute or to let me know in the chat. All right, not seeing anyone off mute. Again, feel free to send in your questions at any point in time. We'll go ahead and now push into user management. And sorry, my dog is sleeping in my room. She's having a slight nightmare. So I think if you hear any whining, that's just my dog having a nightmare. So for user management, we'll talk about adding users to your account. We'll talk about creating permission profiles and assigning permission profiles to users. And then we'll talk about groups of users. So we can add new users to our account from the admin section. We can either do this individually or in bulk. Individually, we'll click the Add User button, and there's going to be a few required fields for adding users. We'll of course need their email address and their name. We'll need their language preference, but remember they can customize that later once they get logged in. And we'll need their permission profile. So what can they do in the system or what can't they do in the system? More on that in a later section. If we want to add users in bulk, we can click the bulk add option. This will allow us to import a CSV or comma separated value file into DocuSign with all of our users' information. There's even a template that you can download that has all of the column headers that you'll need to prepare your uploaded file. In terms of the required column headers, you'll need first name, last name, email, and permission profile. So again, adding in bulk is obviously a time-saving tool. I would say if you're in the process of adding maybe 10 or more people, you might want to think about doing the bulk add just because it will save you a little bit of time versus adding individually. Now, once you get users added to the account, what can you do to those users or how can you manage them? Well, first, you'll have the ability to update their personal information if needed. Maybe someone got married or someone has a job title change. You can easily click into their profile and update that information. You can even switch their permission set if maybe they've been upgraded to admin permissions, for example. The only thing you're not able to customize on their behalf is their email address. They will need to edit that themselves when they log in. We can also reset the password for a particular user if someone's been locked out or maybe they need to change their password. You can reset it and they'll get an email to go through those steps. You can close someone's account. So we don't have a delete option for users. So instead you can close their account and that would prevent them from logging back in. So you can use this if you have someone who's leaving the company or maybe someone who's going on long-term leave. Now on the flip side, you can always reactivate a closed user. Maybe you have a boomerang employee, someone who's left and came back, or maybe you have someone who's returning from long-term leave. You can reactivate their profile and everything will still be intact. Now, some other actions that you can take on your users that aren't listed here include envelope sharing, if you need to share access to envelopes, and transferring custody of envelopes or templates, which we'll talk about later. So let me show you how we can add users, manage a user, and add users in bulk. Coming back into DocuSign, I'm going to go back up to my admin settings. And from the side navigation, we'll select users. So first, I'm going to add a new user individually. So let's say that we have a new athletic director who is joining our school and we want to get them set up as a user. Because it's just one person, I'm going to add them individually. So I'll select Add User at the top. Here, I'll need to plug in the information. So I'll start with the email address. Let's say that this person's name is, let's say, Alex, athletic director. I'll go ahead and type out that email. And when I click next, I'll go ahead and type in the name. So Alex, athletic director. Name is required, as is language preference. All of this other information is optional. I'm going to leave it to Alex to type in this information once they get set up on the account. I'll click next. If necessary, we can add an access code to the activation process. What this would do is I would type the code, communicate this code to Alex, and then Alex would need to enter this code during the activation process. So this is a helpful extra security layer or measure that you can implement, but it is not required. I'll click next, and then I can determine what permission I want to assign to Alex. So you can see I have a variety of permissions already set up. There are some default permissions and a custom profile that I've created. We'll talk more about permission profiles in just a moment. For now, I'm going to make Alex a DocuSign sender. You'll also see that I have the ability to assign Alex to a group. We'll talk more about user groups in a later section. So for now, I'm not going to choose a group. I'll click Add User. And now back on my users page, I can see Alex listed here. He is a pending user, meaning he has not activated his account yet. And he's a DocuSign sender permission profile. Now at this point, Alex will get an email to go in and activate their account. And once they activate their account, they'll set up a password and then their status will switch to active. Now, maybe a couple days go by and Alex has not activated his account. From the actions drop down here, you'll notice one of the options is resend invitation. So on any of your pending users that have not activated, you can always remind them. Now, some other actions that we'll take a look at include close. So maybe I need to close this person's account. I no longer want them to be a user. I can select this. I can also edit someone's information. For example, maybe this other athletic director, Alan. If I come over to the actions drop down, because he is an active user, I have the ability to edit. When I click edit, you'll notice I can edit just about all of his personal information except his email. I can also switch his permission profile if I need to. Now, let's say if I come back to my users page that Alan, that other athletic director, has left our organization. I want to close his account. If I come over to the actions drop down, I can click close. It'll ask me, am I sure I want to close? And I'll say yes. And now it looks like Alan has been removed. Now, in reality, he is still on my account. Remember, we do not have the ability to delete users. We can just close them. But I don't see my closed users on this page. If I want to look for my closed users, I can select filter and click closed. And now I can see all of my users, including those others that I have closed previously. And there's Alan. And from that drop down again, I could reactivate his profile. So that's how we can add and manage users. Let's now talk about how we can add users in bulk. So if we have multiple people that we want to add at a single time. So to bulk add, I can click bulk add. And then here we see some instructions as well as a link to the support site. And I can download a template. So this template will be really helpful. It'll give you all of the column headers that you need. So I'll select download. And it will open as a CSV file or comma separated value file. And you can open it in whatever spreadsheet software you use. So maybe that's Excel, or in my case, I'm using Numbers on a Mac. And just to show you this file, we have some sample information already inputted here. So I could go through and I could, plug in all of the information. I could delete this sample information and then plug in my real user information. First name, last name, email, and permission profile will be required, these first 4 fields. Everything else will be optional. I could make my changes, save this file, and then when I come back to DocuSign, I could upload it into the system. So just to show you, if I come back to the file, let's just do this for 2 users, just for time purposes. I'm going to go ahead and delete these other rows and just do 2 people. We'll call this maybe Kirsten Smith, and let's do Lewis Jones or Lewis Love. I'll go ahead and do some emails here that are unique. And for the other one, I'll do Lewis. I'll keep the permission profile as DocuSign sender for both of them. But then remember, these other columns are completely optional. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete them. I don't want to go ahead and include that information today. We'll keep it simple and just do the required fields. So now I'm going to save this file to my computer. And very important when you're saving that you make sure that it is in the CSV format. That's going to be the only way that you can add it into DocuSign. If it converts to an Excel workbook or a numbers spreadsheet, it's not going to upload correctly. It needs to be in that CSV format. When I come back to DocuSign, make this full screen, I can click Upload File and look for that file. Again, I want to do the CSV version. I'll go ahead and click Submit and then Confirm. And then I'll be taken right away to the bulk actions log where I can see the progress of this action. So right now it's queued, meaning that it's processing. If I refresh, we should see that hopefully that goes through pretty quickly since it was only 2 users. So now it's been marked as completed. If I were to come back to my users page, I can see now that Lewis and Kirsten should be added as pending users. They now have been sent an activation email to go in and set up their password. Now, in addition to adding users in bulk, you can also update users in bulk if you need to make changes to permission profiles or personal information. Another helpful tip with that is you can download a list of your current users into your spreadsheet, make the updates, and then upload that spreadsheet back using bulk update. Very similar process to adding users in bulk. So let's talk a little bit about permission profiles. So the permission profile essentially just defines what a user can and cannot do within DocuSign. Now, by default, there are 3 permission profiles created for you when you set up your account: DocuSign Admin, DocuSign Sender, and DocuSign Viewer. These 3 default permission profiles each have a different level of access to DocuSign. DocuSign Admin will have the highest level of access to the system. They'll be able to make customizations to the admin settings that we've been looking at today. They'll also be able to do basic things like send out envelopes or maybe create templates. DocuSign Sender is a slightly more restricted profile. These individuals won't have access to any of the admin settings. They can do basic things like send out envelopes and use templates as long as they've been created by other users and shared with them. DocuSign Viewer is the most restricted. These individuals only have access to log into DocuSign and sign envelopes that they've been sent. They're not able to create new envelopes or make any changes to account settings. So DocuSign Viewer could be helpful for maybe someone higher up, for example, a school president or a director of a different department, somebody who just needs a single place to go to look for all of their documents that they've signed, but they don't necessarily, need to be able to make changes on the account. Now, in addition to the default profiles, you can also create your own custom profiles. When you're creating custom profiles, you have the ability to pick and choose what permissions will be applied. So you can customize what level of access the profile will have to admin settings, as well as what level of access the user will have to basic user actions, like using Power Forms or templates, for example. So we'll take a look at all of the permissions available. We'll start with the defaults, and then I'll show you how to create a custom profile. So coming back into the system, if I go to my admin settings, right underneath users, we'll see permission profiles. Now here you can see I have my 3 default profiles, admin, sender, and viewer. And I also have a custom profile that I created previously called template creator. Now from the side menu, you'll see an actions dropdown. And for each profile, you'll see some actions. For the custom profile that I created, I can make edits to its permissions. I can delete it from the system if I no longer need it. And I have the ability to copy it if I want to use it as a base for creating a new profile. But if I were to look at any of my default profiles, admin, sender, or viewer, notice from the actions menu, I cannot edit or delete. So the default permissions will always be in the system as is. You cannot remove them, nor can you delete them. Now to create a new profile, I can click Add Permission Profile at the top to create it from scratch, or I can copy a permission profile that already exists and then make minor adjustments. And I would say that's a best practice for sure. That way you have a starting point. So I'm going to create a new profile for our admissions team managers. We have some people that are managers on our admissions team, and they need to be able to send out envelopes, but also need the ability to create templates and access account-wide reporting. To set up this profile, I'll click the Actions dropdown and then click Copy from Sender. I'm copying DocuSign Sender, and I'm going to go ahead and title this Admissions Team Managers. Now I want them to have some level of access to admin, so I can choose no admin access, some admin access, or all. If I pick some, then I can individually pick and choose the different areas in admin that they can access. So in this case, I want them to be able to access account-wide reporting. If I go over to user permissions, I can get a little bit more granular. So I want them to be able to send out envelopes. I also want them to be able to create templates. So I'll adjust this permission. I can determine what type of PowerForm user they should be, and some more specific permissions down below, like the ability to send using a bulk list, or maybe even at the bottom, the ability to leverage supplemental documents. I'll go ahead and just click Add, and now I have this new profile created, and I can assign it to my users as I add them. So now let's talk a little bit about user groups. So you can create user groups on your account in order to organize your account users into different business units or departments. Now, groups are going to be helpful for a variety of different reasons. First, they can allow you to easily share templates. For example, if you create a template, maybe for your athletics department, maybe it's a season ticket renewal form for your football team, you want to share that template with everyone that works in athletics that's going to need to use it. Instead of clicking on each individual person that works in athletics, you can select the athletics group of users, and then anyone who is in that group will have access to that template. You can also use groups as a way to assign access to brands. So for example, with our athletics group, maybe we want to make sure that they only have the ability to use the athletics signing brand that we created. We can run reports on our group activity. So maybe I'm curious which group is using DocuSign the most. Maybe it's HR versus athletics versus IT or human resources. I can run this report and see a list of each group, how many envelopes they've sent within a given time period. And who knows, maybe this could help you identify a need to upskill or train a particular group if they're not using DocuSign in the way that they should or in the volume that they should. Lastly, you can transfer custody of envelopes from groups to other users on your account. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Now, the other type of group that you can create is a signing group. Signing groups allow you to send an envelope to a group of recipients where only one member of the group needs to take action on the envelope. So basically, signing groups are a way for you to share signing responsibilities with several people. Now, there are several benefits of using signing groups. For example, any member from the group can act on the envelope. You can have as many as 200 members in a group. I know the slide says 50, but that update was recently made to allow for 200 people in a signing group. And the people in your signing group do not need to have a DocuSign account. So maybe they are members of your account, or maybe they are what we call external recipients or non-account users. Now, once you add the signing group to your account, anyone has the ability to add that signing group as a recipient on an envelope. And how it works is everyone in the group will get a notification about the envelope, and the first person to act on the notification and go in and sign is the quote unquote winner, the person who is signing on behalf of the group. Now we'll see signing groups in action. It is important to note that signing groups might not be available on your account. So if you do not see this feature as you're clicking around, you can reach out to DocuSign support and maybe even bring it up to Carrie and Jesse as well. They'll be able to help potentially answer any of those more advanced questions. But let's go ahead and take a look at user groups and signing groups. I'm going to pull up my account again. And from my admin settings, right underneath permission profiles, I'm going to select groups. Now here you can see I already have quite a few groups created. By default, your account is going to come with 2 groups: administrators, which includes anyone who has all administrative permissions as denoted in their profile, and everyone, that includes everyone. These other groups that I've created, admissions, human resources, and IT, are all custom. To create a group, I'll just click Add Group at the top and give it a name. So I'm going to create a new group for Athletics Department. I'll click Add. And now that I have this new user group, I can add users to it. So from the users little tab here, I can select Assign User. And I can pick and choose who works in athletics. So maybe Alex, our new athletic director, works obviously in athletics. And then I'm also going to go ahead and add Jesse Smith, or Jesse School, excuse me. I'll click Assign, and now those 2 users are added. Remember, when we were going through the process of adding users, one of the options was to add them to a group during the adding process. So you don't always have to add the user and then come over here to add them to a group. You can include the group assignment in the initial adding process. So now I have people in this group. I can also assign a brand to this group if I want to allow them to use it. If I go to the Brands tab, I can click Assign Brand. And I can choose from any of my assigning brands. So I'm going to select the Athletics brand and click Assign. So now those users in this group will be able to only use the ABC Athletics brand. Of course, if someone is an administrator, they'll be able to see all brands on the account, but these 2 folks are senders, so they'll only be able to see the brand that I've assigned to them as through the group, which is athletics. Now, maybe I want to share a template with this group. If I go to my templates tab, let's say that I have a template for my athletics team. For example, maybe this registration form. This is for a sports banquet of some kind. If I want to share this registration form with my athletics team, I can go to the drop-down menu and select Share with Users. And I can individually pick or choose. Or if I go to the Groups tab, I can select my athletics department, and this will share this template with everyone in that group, including any new people that I add to this group later if I bring on more athletics team members. So now let's talk about signing groups. I'm going to come back up to settings, and then from the side navigation, right underneath groups, we'll see signing groups. Again, you may not see this in your account. You can always reach out to support to get it added. Now, I already have a signing group set up for board of directors, but in our example today, let's say that every student athlete at our school needs to sign a waiver prior to them participating in the season. Now, once the athlete has signed the waiver, it needs to be signed by a member of our athletic department. Now, only one athletic department member needs to sign. We don't need it to be signed by everyone. But we don't want the responsibility to lie solely on one member from our athletics department. What if somebody's out of the office or sick? So what we can do is create a signing group to share that responsibility. I'll click Add Signing Group, and I'll give it a name. So I'll call this Athletics Team Members. I'll add anyone who I want. So maybe I'll add my athletic director, and I'll also add Jesse. I can also add people who are not members of my account by selecting add user manually and by typing in their name and email. So your signing group can be a combination of account users or what we call external recipients. So I've added Alex and Jesse. Now, as it stands right now, Alex and Jesse are both going to be notified if I add this signing group as a recipient on an envelope. So they'll be notified separately. There is a feature to use an alternate email address for notifications sent to the signing group. So maybe instead of each person receiving separate email notifications, I want all of the notifications to be sent to, athletics@abcuniversity.edu. How this would work is Jesse and Alex would obviously need to have access to that inbox, but they could act on the envelope from that single email versus each of them receiving their own separate email. So I'm not going to check off this option today because I don't have a shared email address that I'm going to use. I'm just going to have both members be receiving separate email notifications. I'll select add. And now I have this athletics team member group set up as a signing group. And if I were to go to create a template or send out an envelope, instead of typing in each person as an individual recipient, I can look for this group to add as a recipient, and those two people would be notified. And the first person to go in and sign would sign on behalf of the group. So with that, we've reached the end of part one. We're making pretty good time. We're about halfway through the session. So I just want to pause and see if there are any questions that I can answer before we take a little break.
If I can, I'd just like to let everybody know with regards to adding users, this is one part of a two-part process. If you have to add a user, you will need to fill out a ticket, DocuSign change ticket. It's not live yet. It will be, and we will broadcast when it is. And on the back end, we're going to need to enable for single sign-on and, of course, multi-factor authentication. However, the user themselves within DocuSign, you'll still need to add. And, of course, you'll have the ability to control that. And that was it.
Yeah, great call out. Thank you for that. Great. Well, I think this would be a good time then for our 5-minute break. I can put a little timer up on the screen just so we can see how much time we have left. And then Carrie, I don't know if you want to pause the recording during the break or if you want me to, either way works. All right, so that was the end of part one. We're now going to move into part two. So we'll talk about sharing and transferring custody of envelopes, some additional administrative settings that you can customize, and then we'll wrap up with retention, reporting, and automation. So let's start with sharing, transfer, and custody transfer. So we'll start with envelope sharing, then we'll talk about envelope transfer. So envelope sharing allows you to share a user's envelopes with another user or group of users and allow them to take action on those envelopes. So this is a really helpful tool if you want to allow users to collaborate on envelopes. Users with access to shared envelopes will have the ability to view the envelope's contents, make any corrections, void a transaction, or even resend the email notification for any in-progress envelopes. But they won't be able to send a new envelope as though they were the original user, nor will they be able to sign on behalf of that shared user. So again, it's really just a helpful way to share access or visibility into envelopes on the account. So a lot of times people will use this if someone is maybe out of the office or on, taking a couple of days off and they want to make sure that their transactions are being monitored by someone else. Now, as a note with envelope sharing, it is all or nothing. So you're not able to pick and choose the envelopes that you want to share with others. It's all of somebody's envelopes or none of somebody's envelopes. And the reason I mention that is because you may have a user who might have confidential information in maybe their sent folder or their inbox on the account. Well, if you go to share that person's envelopes with someone else, another user on your account could inadvertently see that confidential information. So again, just something important to keep in mind is that all of the envelopes will be shared. But as an example today, let's say that maybe at our school within our HR team, our users use DocuSign to send out new hire agreements. Let's say that Sarah is one of the members of our HR team, and she's going to be on vacation for a few days, and she has some outstanding transactions or envelopes that she wants to be monitored while she's away. Well, what we can do is we can set up envelope sharing between Sarah and another user on the account that will be her backup, and they can take action on those envelopes if needed. So we'll see how to set that up in just a minute. On the other hand, we can transfer envelopes between users. So transferring envelopes would actually change the owner of the envelope from one user to another user on your account. Now, with the previous example, with Sarah being out of the office, envelope sharing is going to be the best bet because Sarah is ultimately going to come back from vacation. So when she's back from vacation, we can just stop the sharing. As opposed to envelope transfer, it would technically transfer the custody of the envelopes from one user to another. So just to twist our scenario a little bit, maybe while Sarah was on vacation, she won the lottery and she's decided to leave our school. She no longer needs to work, at all really. So what we can do in that case, if Sarah's not going to come back, is we can actually transfer custody of all of Sarah's envelopes or templates to a new user on the account that will be taking over her workload. So again, with transfer, you're moving the envelope or template from one user to another permanently. You can always go back if you need to, but it just actually moves it from their account to the other person's account. Now, you can transfer envelopes or templates individually by picking and choosing, or you can do it in bulk through a CSV file. Now, another way that you can transfer envelopes is by creating an automated custody transfer rule, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's first go through a demonstration of sharing envelopes and transferring envelopes manually. So I'm going to pull up my account here. And let's start in the users page in admin. So again, let's stick with that example that Sarah is going to be out of the office on vacation and her backup, let's say, is going to be Anne. So from the users page, I could locate Sarah's username all the way down here. And from Sarah's user, I could go over to the actions dropdown. And here you'll see a couple of options. I can share envelopes with user, or I can share users envelopes. In this case, because Sarah is the selected user, I'm going to choose share users envelopes. I want to take Sarah's envelopes and I want to share them with someone else. From here, I can then click add users. Who do I want to share these envelopes with? In our case, I want to share them with Anne. So I'll select assign. So now that sharing is set up. Now when Anne logs into DocuSign, she will see Sarah's envelopes. And this sharing is indefinite. It's not going to automatically go away when Sarah gets back from vacation. So if I wanted to remove the sharing, I can easily just click remove. Now, what would that look like from Anne's perspective? Well, if I open up a new window here, I'll do an incognito window. And if I log into DocuSign as Anne, and put in the password. Gotta authenticate because I haven't logged in as her in a long time. Let me quickly just pull that up. Sometimes when you don't log in as a new user for a little bit, you've gotta prove that you are the right person. So let me just do that in the incognito window. Oops. Plug in the code. And now we're logged in as Anne, ideally. So now when Anne logs into DocuSign, if she goes to her Manage tab to take a look at her envelopes, she can see her normal screen here. but she can also click shared envelopes here at the top and then pick and choose which user she wants to look at envelopes for. Right now, she only has access to look at Sarah's. So she can select Sarah School, and then she would be able to see any of Sarah's sent envelopes here. Now it looks like I don't have any envelopes that were sent from Sarah just prior to this training. But if I did, remember, Anne would be able to view the envelopes, make any corrections if they're in progress. She can resend any email notifications, as well as void a transaction as long as it's in progress. What Anne cannot do is send out a new envelope as though she were Sarah, nor can she sign an envelope on behalf of Sarah. And notice too, there's this little bar at the top that lets her know that she's looking at Sarah's envelopes, not her own. If she clicks return, she's back on the normal screen and the new button comes back. Now, if I come back up to my account here, and let's say that Sarah gets back from vacation, remember, we would want to come back into this screen and click remove to remove the sharing. Now, Anne no longer has access to Sarah's envelopes. So now let's say that Sarah is going to be leaving our company permanently. She's won the lottery and she's not coming back. So I want to transfer all of Sarah's envelopes to another user on my account. So I can go to the users page and I can locate a specific user, for example, Sarah. And if I wanted to transfer her envelopes, I could use that actions dropdown again. And this time I can select transfer envelopes. Now I don't think I'll have any envelopes for Sarah. Yep, unfortunately I don't. I could try to adjust the date range here if I wanted to by clicking filters. Right now I'm only looking at envelopes that were sent within the past couple of days. But if I widen that range out, I might be able to see some results. I'm not. So I'm just going to come back and do a different user that I know has envelopes, and I'll do myself. So I'll go to actions and then transfer envelopes for my user. And we should definitely see some results here. So here are all of the envelopes that I've sent within the past 2 days. If I want to transfer all of these, I can click the little checkbox here at the top, and that selects all of the options. And then I can choose transfer now. Here I could transfer to maybe Anne, if she's going to be my backup now that I'm leaving. And I could even choose to keep myself as a carbon copy if necessary. In this case, since my user will probably be closed after this transfer is executed, I probably don't need to be a carbon copy, but if that's needed for visibility, you can keep that. Once I confirm, I'll be taken back to that bulk actions log where we were when we added users in bulk. And we can see that the transfer is going through, it's queued. But again, if I just refresh after a couple of moments, ideally it should be marked as completed. And then all of those envelopes that I selected will be taken into Anne's custody. Awesome, it's completed. So now if I go back to Anne's account with DocuSign that I still have open, if Anne goes to her sent folder, for example, she's now going to see those 3 envelopes that I just transferred to her. And that transfer will be captured in the history of the envelope. For example, if I click on this envelope at the top and go to history, I can see that originally it was sent by me, but it was transferred down here on September 7th. So again, that will always be captured. So that's how you can transfer custody of envelopes manually. There's also another way to transfer custody, and that's through an automated custody transfer rule. So let's demonstrate that. So you can use custody transfer rules to transfer envelopes from an individual user or a group of users to another user on your account. Now you can choose when the transfer would occur. Is it based off of when the envelope was sent or when it was marked as completed? So how does that look, or how do we set this up? You'll start by choosing where the envelope is coming from. Is it from a specific user or maybe a group of users? You'll then say where the envelope is going to be transferred to. So you'll choose a user from your account. You'll determine the transfer time. So is the transfer happening once the envelope has been sent or once the envelope has been marked as complete? You can also choose to transfer prior to first send. So what would happen here is once the envelope is sent by the original person, before the envelope even gets to the inbox of the recipient, the transfer is going to occur and the envelope will look like it's coming from the original or from the new owner, excuse me. So we'll see that in action here when we set up a rule. So let's jump in and I'll demonstrate how to create a rule and we will see how it is executed. In this example, let's say that we have a user, Jessie, and she's interning with our athletics department. Now, Jessie is going to be sending out some envelopes to alumni who are interested in purchasing tickets for a sporting event. But we don't want the envelopes to come from Jessie because our alumni don't know who that is. So in this case, we could set up a custody transfer rule so that way, whenever Jessie sends an envelope, it's going to be transferred right away to a generic user, for example, ABC Athletics. So to set up this rule in my admin settings, underneath custody transfer on the side, I'll click add rule. First, I need to determine where the envelope is coming from. In our case, we're going to choose Jessie. But if we had multiple interns that were helping us out, I could put them all in a group maybe, and I could also select from a group, and I could choose maybe my athletics interns. In our case, we just have one person, that's Jessie, so I'm going to keep that selected. Then who is it going to? Maybe I want to transfer it to ABC Athletics. That's a generic user that I have. Where do I want the envelopes to go? Do I want them to be placed in the inbox or the sent folder? I'll do the sent folder. When is the transfer occurring? In this case, I want it to occur on send and prior to first send. So that way it looks like it's coming from ABC Athletics, but in reality, it was sent by Jessie. Now, if I wanted to keep Jessie as a carbon copy so she could track the progress of the transaction, I could. And I could go ahead and click save at the bottom. Now I have this rule set up and it will be effective. Now, if I needed to make a modification to this rule, unfortunately, we don't have an edit option. So I would either need to disable the rule and create a new one or delete the rule and create a new one. So we're not able to edit a rule once we set it up. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into some additional administrative settings. So there are a lot of account settings that I would love to show you throughout class. We've gone ahead and we've highlighted some of the more commonly used actions here that we'll touch on. So sending and signing settings, legal disclosure, reminders and expirations, comments, custom fields, and payments. So let's start with sending and signing settings. The first setting that I want to mention is auto navigation. This feature is a helpful tool for you as an admin to enable. And what it does is it allows your users to be guided, or your recipients rather, to be guided through the signing process. For example, you can see in this first snippet, the recipient is being navigated through the required fields. You can see that as they click the fill in button, they're going to be taken through only the required field, even if it's not a required field. So depending on how guided of an experience you would like for your recipients, you can choose one of these auto navigation methods. We'll also touch on some recipient signing settings. So from this section, you can customize which options are available for your recipients when they sign envelopes that you send them. For example, you can see you can require a reason when someone declines to sign. So if a recipient chooses decline to sign, you can have them type in why and then capture that in the history. You could allow recipients to print and sign on paper if they need to provide maybe a physical or a wet signature. Now for this, you can also allow senders to override. So maybe you want to keep it on for your account, but then allow your senders to choose whether or not they actually want to use it for a particular transaction. Similar concept with changing signing responsibility. So this setting allows the recipients to change who the designated signer is going to be, if that is necessary in a specific use case. So again, you can turn this on or off for your account, or you could allow your senders to override or change what's been set up at the account level for a particular transaction. Another setting that I want to call out here is the allow recipients to create DocuSign accounts option. This is going to present your recipients with a pop-up window after they finish signing, prompting them to create a free DocuSign account. Now with the free DocuSign account, it's mainly just a storage unit, if you will, for all of the envelopes that you send them. They're not able to, create and send envelopes on their own from a free account. But this could be helpful, especially if you're sending to the same parties over and over again, and you want them to have that central location to manage all of their transactions. For example, with other schools that we work with, I've seen clients use this for parents if they're sending out tuition and admissions paperwork to parents to review and sign. The parents might want to be prompted to create a DocuSign account to have that central location to find all of the forms that were sent about their student in the future. Again, totally optional, but could potentially make life easier for your recipients. Another cool feature that we'll talk about is responsive signing. So responsive signing will allow you to send out documents through DocuSign, but if you have a user that is using a mobile device or a tablet, DocuSign will automatically convert your documents to HTML format, so that way it's more legible for your recipients. So it'll automatically resize your fields as well as your document text. So honestly, in our statistics, we found that 1 in 3 people these days are signing from mobile. So I'd say this feature is a pretty important one, especially just with the prevalence of mobile devices, in these times. And again, you can see an example of how that really helps with the experience. So let's take a look at some of those settings. I'm going to go back to my account here. And from the admin settings, we'll start with the signing settings. So from the side menu, I'll select signing settings. And from here, you can see I have the auto navigation option. So how do I want recipients to be navigated through the signing? Right now I have it set to all fields, but again, I could just navigate through required if I want. Here's that responsive signing feature right below. I've gone ahead and turned it on. For my recipients, here I can require a reason when someone declines to sign. I could allow recipients to print and sign on paper and allow my senders to override that. Perhaps as a best practice, it might be a good idea to allow recipients to sign on paper and then leave it up to the sender as to whether or not they want to use it. But at least this way it's turned off, but then the sender can turn it on. Same thing with changing the signing responsibility. I'll turn off the parent option, but leave the child option on, so that way my senders can choose if they would like to use that. Here's that allow recipients to create a DocuSign account option. Remember, they'll get a prompt after they finish signing to set up a free account. Down below, we have some additional options like the date signed field. Remember, this date signed field will pull in when we add it onto a document or a template, so we can determine how that date signed field is formatted and whether or not we want to include the time. We have our signature adoption configuration. If I open this up, this is where I can determine what signature adoption methods are available. Do I want to disable the draw a signature option? Disable the upload a signature option, and I can even lock recipient names so that they're not able to edit that when they're signing. What's the default signature adoption method? Do I want them to start on choosing from one of our pre-selected options? And then for mobile, maybe I want them to start on draw, just because drawing a signature might be a little bit easier on a mobile device. We can choose the number of pixels required for signature and initial. These are defaulted to 120, and as a best practice, I'd recommend keeping them at right around 120. If you make it too small, then you might not be able to read the signature or the initials that someone inputs in. We do also have all of our signature styles, so you can pick and choose which ones you want to keep based off of your organization's guidelines. For example, me, I don't really like the Arial signature. I've deselected that from my account. And of course, saving our changes at the bottom. Coming back to signing settings, I also want to talk a little bit about supplemental documents down here. So we discussed supplemental documents in our DocuSign 101 session, but remember, a supplemental document is basically a document that's added to an envelope that is extra, so to speak. It's not a document that's going to require fields to be filled out. So it's really helpful for things like terms and conditions, or maybe extra legal terms that you need to append to a document. Now, as an admin, you can determine how your users should be leveraging supplemental documents, or what's the default behavior, if you will. Should signers need to click view on a supplement? Should they need to click accept on a supplement? Or do they need to click view, scroll down to the bottom, theoretically reading, and click accept? So again, as an admin, this is where you determine the default behavior. If you don't select any of these options, then you are leaving it up to your senders to determine how the recipients should be interacting with the supplements. So I'm going to check off must read. And again, that automatically will check off the other options as well, because in this case, read implies both view and accept. So I'm going to save at the bottom. And now let's take a look at how that would appear from the sender's perspective. So if I go to the home page and I send out an envelope, I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple of documents. I will do, let's say, an offer letter. And I'll also go ahead and add in a benefits package. I think it's around here somewhere. Yeah, benefits enrollment. So I'm sending out an offer letter to a candidate, and I also want to include our benefits information, but I want to mark this as a supplemental document. I can do that by clicking the ellipses and then selecting set as supplement. And now you can see at the top, it's marked as supplemental. So I'm just going to plug in some information for our candidate. We'll say Lily Barker, and I'll click next. Now that I have my document here in the middle for my offer letter, and then at the bottom, I have my supplement. When I click on the supplement, I can determine how the recipient should interact. Right now, it's defaulted to read and accept because that is what I set up in my admin settings. But because I'm an administrator, I have the ability to override what's been set up at the account level. And maybe I want Lily to just have to view, or only need to click the view button. So the ability to override what's been set by the administrative settings as it relates to supplemental documents is something that is set in someone's permission profile. Admins will always be able to override, but again, if someone's maybe a DocuSign sender, or you have a more customized permission profile, you can give that capability. Coming back up to admin settings, I also want to talk about envelope delivery options. So from signing settings down below, all the way down to the bottom, there are some delivery options. Here you have the ability as an admin to attach the documents to the completion email that the recipient gets, and you can even attach the certificate of completion. Now with this, there is a 5 megabyte limit. So if your document is larger than 5 MB, it won't be able to be attached. And I would say in a lot of situations where you might be having people fill in sensitive information, like social security number or student ID number, you may not want those documents that have that information to be attached to the email specifically. You might want people to have to click into the actual signing process to see that information. So maybe I might want to deselect those two options. So coming back, let's now talk about some sending settings. So one of the first sending settings that I'll mention is the ability to limit what fields are available for your senders. So for example, you could limit access to the attachment field, which would allow your recipients to attach a file during the signing process. Maybe you don't want your senders to be able to add that field. You can deselect Enable Signer Attachment field. There's also a formula field or a calculated field, which will calculate a value based off of previous field entries. You can disable that formula field and then your users would not be able to see it. There are some more advanced options here like conditional fields and conditional routing if those need to be enabled or disabled, as well as the option to determine the default font styling for fields. So maybe your school uses a specific font. You can determine that here in admin, and then when a field is added to a document or a template, that font will be applied versus your users having to click in and change that font on every field they add. We'll also take a look at document visibility. So document visibility allows you to send one envelope with multiple documents, and you have the ability to control which documents each recipient can see. Now, for example, let's say that we're sending a medical form template where we're going to have some sensitive information entered in by our students, and we don't want that information to be seen by other recipients on the document. Well, we can add or use document visibility to hide that document from other recipients on the envelope. By default, the sender, of course, will always be able to see all of the documents that are being added. And if we're using document visibility, someone will only be able to see a document if there is a field that they need to fill out. If they don't have a field to fill out on that document, it will not be visible. So how is this set up? In admin, from the document visibility section, you can determine if it's off, meaning you just aren't using it at all on your account. You can also determine if you want to determine the default behavior for the account, must sign to view unless a member of the account, which means that the recipient needs to be a member of your account in order to see a document, or if they have a field to sign, they can see the document. Or must sign to view unless sender. This means the recipient can only see the document if they have a field to fill in, even if they're a member of the account, doesn't matter, unless of course they are the sender. Now the other two options, sender can set for both, basically is saying you as an admin want to leave it up to your senders to determine the document visibility behavior, versus the top two are you turning it on at the account level. Now, how does this look if you are using document visibility? Well, if you have multiple recipients and multiple documents, you'll see a matrix where you can see who has fields on each document. That's denoted with the checkbox that's uncheckable, versus someone who doesn't have fields, there's a checkbox that is not checkable. And then for documents that just don't have fields at all, you can pick and choose who is able to see each one. So we'll see and take a look at this in an example in just a minute. But as a note too, document visibility will not work with power forms, supplemental documents, or free form signing. So let's jump in. We'll take a look at some of those settings and also document visibility specifically. So from here in admin, I'll go to sending settings. Right at the top, this is where I can set the default font for all of my fields. If I click edit, I can choose from any of our font options. I could enable the formula field, the attachment field. I can also turn on more advanced functionality like conditional fields or conditional routing. Down below, I have document visibility. So I have it set to sender can set must sign to view unless sender. So I'm leaving it up to the sender of the envelope, and people will only be able to see a document if they have a field to fill in, unless of course they are the sender. Scrolling down, we have some more advanced recipient roles that we can turn on all the way down here at the bottom. So here's where I can turn on things like witness signing, bulk recipients, the needs to view role, specify recipients, allow to edit, update recipients, and in-person signing. So up until now, we've really only talked about needs to sign and receives a copy, but here you can see some of our more advanced recipient roles that you can assign depending on how you want someone to interact with the envelope. So I have all of them turned on in my account, and I'll show you where you can assign them to a recipient. So I'm just going to save my changes down at the bottom, and let's take a look at document visibility. So from the home page, I'm going to click Start, Send an Envelope. I'm going to add in a couple of documents here, so I'll select Upload, and I'll just add a couple of things. I'll maybe do an offer letter again, and I'll do a more sensitive document, maybe these terms and conditions. And then I'll add 2 recipients. I'll do my candidate, Lily Barker, and I'll do my hiring manager, Helen. Now, to turn on document visibility for this envelope, I'm going to go to Advanced Options in the top. And here we'll see recipients must be signers to view signed documents. If I turn this on, that means I'm using document visibility for this envelope. Remember, it's not going to be on by default because in my admin settings, I selected that I would leave it up to the sender of the envelope. So now that it's on, let's go to the next page and add some fields. So on our offer letter, maybe at the bottom, we would like our candidate to sign, and we also would like our hiring manager to sign. But then on the second document, the terms and conditions, we only want this to be signed by the candidate. So I'm going to add a signature field for Lily Barker only at the bottom. So now to preview the document visibility to make sure that the right people are seeing the right documents, I can come over to the far right, and next to where it says Documents, select a gear icon, Document Visibility. And here you can see it's working. So for the offer letter, both Lily and Helen have to see this because they have fields to fill out. But for the terms and conditions, only Lily can see it because she has a field to fill out and not Helen. So again, this is a great feature to use if you want to limit visibility on documents within a single envelope if you have multiple recipients. I'm just going to discard this envelope. All right, so now let's take a look at the legal disclosure configuration. So the legal disclosure is basically a way for you to capture consent from those who are going to be signing your envelopes. Now, by default, DocuSign provides you with a legal disclosure that you can use, and you can also choose to customize the default disclosure if you would like to maybe insert some of your own specific information for your organization. Now, the default legal disclosure that DocuSign provides is only compatible between agreements that happen between 2 US-based parties or US-based parties only. So if you are going to be doing international business, you may need to create a custom legal disclosure. So you can create a custom legal disclosure, obviously per the guidance of your legal counsel. And if you choose to create a custom legal disclosure, you will not be able to go back to the regular default disclosure. So it is a one-time switch if you choose to go custom. If you are using the legal disclosure at all, you can choose to set the frequency for which people must accept the legal disclosure. You can choose to allow recipients to withdraw consent. If maybe they're declining to sign, they also might want to withdraw their consent from the legal disclosure. And you can choose to use your company name if you're using a signing brand. You can have the legal disclosure show the company name as denoted in your brand that you're using. And again, we've probably seen this a few times just throughout today's class and in other classes that I've taught. At the top, that's where that legal disclosure would appear prior to them actually filling out the fields. We also have some reminders and expirations. So you can choose to set up account-wide reminder and expiration policies. So reminders is going to send an automated reminder to recipients if they do not sign within a certain time period. And then expirations is going to say that if transactions are not signed within a certain number of days, they'll automatically expire. So as an admin, you can set up these policies for your entire account, and you can actually allow your senders to override what's set up in the account by default if they need to. So with the reminders, by default, this is set to be off, but you can turn it on and make it anywhere between 1 and 999 days. And then for expiration, this is set by default to be 120. So on the 120th day after the envelope has been sent, if people do not sign, it will automatically expire. But again, you can set that to be anywhere from 1 to 999 days. You can see for both reminder and expiration, there's the ability to warn, or for expiration rather, there's the ability to warn someone before the expiration occurs. And then for reminders, after you send the first reminder, you can have them go out on a recurring basis. I would say as a best practice for expiration specifically, you might want to warn them a little bit closer to the day that you actually sent the envelope versus closer to the day that it expires. That way they're having ample time to go in and act after receiving a warning that the transaction will expire. We'll also take a look at the comments feature. So the comments feature allows recipients to communicate back and forth with one another on a document. And this is helpful because all of the comments will be captured in the envelope's history, as opposed to your recipients having to communicate outside of the envelope via email or maybe instant message. So with the comments feature, you can turn it on, and you can allow your senders to override. So maybe it's on the account, but you have a particular envelope that you don't want to have comments turned on for. You can turn it off. And how it looks is from the user experience, they'll see a comment icon. They can drag it onto the document, type out a comment or a question, and then target who they want to show that to. As the sender, you'll be able to see all comments that come through. Now, with comments, because that information is captured in the history, it's important that personally identifiable information isn't entered in. So if you think that your recipients might be tempted to do that or inadvertently use comments, I'd recommend maybe keeping comments off. I would say too, if you're worried about that, that could also be something that you communicate with Jesse and Carrie about in working sessions. They can certainly provide you with information about how other clients have approached that concern in the past. But we'll take a look at comments in our next demo here. So let's jump in and turn on comments and see how they are added to an envelope. Within DocuSign, I'll go back up to my admin settings. And to turn on comments, I'll go over to the side navigation. And I'll select comments under signing and sending. From here, I can see that comments are turned on. I'm allowing senders to override, and I'm including comment text in email notifications when a comment is posted. So what this means is after someone posts a comment, I'm going to be notified as the sender, and I can see the comment text in that email notification. It's kind of a nice way of avoiding having to click into the envelope to see the comment. You'll see it right away in the email. Now, I also want to mention that the comments feature is retroactive. So if I were to turn this off and save, for any of my in-progress envelopes that I have out in the universe, the comments functionality would be disabled. No new comments would be able to be added. On the flip side, if it was off and I turned it on, any in-progress envelopes that I have out in the universe that didn't have comment functionality would. So I'm going to turn it on, and let's go ahead and see how that would look. So I'm going to send out an envelope. I'll select Start, Send an envelope. I'll go ahead and add in a document here. I'll do maybe I'll do a non-disclosure agreement just as a sample. And I'm going to be sending this non-disclosure agreement to a disclosing party and a receiving party. So my disclosing party, I'll say, is Diane, and my receiving party is Ronald. To make sure that comments are turned on for this envelope, I can go to advanced options in the upper right-hand corner, and I can select down at the bottom, comments. So they're turned on because I have them turned on in my admin settings. So now I'll click next. And at the bottom of this NDA, I'll add some fields. So I'll add a signature field for my disclosing party. And for my receiving party, I'll add a signature field. And I'll just keep it at that to be simple. And now I'll click send. So now how do the comments get added? So let's go to my email and see what that looks like. So I have two new emails, one for Diane and one for Ronald. Let's say that Diane opens the envelope first. She agrees to that legal disclosure. I'm just using the general default legal disclosure, which you can see here. She'll click continue, and then she'll scroll down and maybe provide her signature. Again, she can choose from any of our predefined styles, draw or upload. And I actually have it so that the recipient name and initials are locked. So she can't go by Di disclosing, for example. She can't change her name. So now if Diane wants to add a comment, she can click the add comment button and then drag it to the right spot. She'll type out her question or comment. So she'll maybe say, is there an early opt-out option? She can ask it to a specific recipient, maybe Ronald, or maybe she just wants to ask me as the sender. Let's say she wants to ask Ronald. Notice that I'm also automatically selected. So the sender will always be able to see all of the comments. I'll click post, and Diane just needs to acknowledge that that comment will be kept in the history of the envelope. So now she'll click finish. And if I come back to sorry, not to deviate, but here's that prompt for setting up a free DocuSign account that I mentioned earlier. Not going to do that. But now coming back to my envelope here, I can see I've got a couple emails. The first is one letting me know that I have a comment that was posted. Diane Disclosing has posted a comment. And here's that comment preview text so I can see what she posted. But now if Ronald were to go in and sign the NDA, he'll agree to the legal disclosure. Scrolling down, he'll be able to sign and see Diane's question. So maybe he'll say, yes, there is an option to opt out at 18 months. I'll just say this is noted in clause, 9. He'll agree to that same thing, and then he'll go ahead and sign. And now when I click finish, everyone will get a completed copy of the envelope, and the comments will be accessible in the completed version as well as downloadable if necessary. So everyone will be able to see those. But again, really helpful way for them to communicate back and forth on the document rather than getting a bunch of different emails outside of DocuSign. So for example, maybe Diane wants to view the completed NDA. She can see the comments. So now let's talk a little bit about custom fields. So there are two different types of custom fields that we are going to add in class today. There are document custom fields and envelope custom fields. Let's start with document custom fields. These allow you to create custom versions of standard fields and save them for reuse. For example, maybe you collect a lot of the same information on a lot of your templates or on a lot of your envelopes. Instead of wasting your time recreating that field every single time you need to add it, you can save it once as a custom field. And if you're an admin, you can share a field with other users. An envelope custom field is more so for back-end usage and tracking. You can create a custom field that will be filled in by the sender of the envelope. And these are helpful to classify the envelopes that you're tracking. And then that information will be available in the envelope's history, as well as within any reports that you run on the envelope. So document custom fields are for recipients. envelope custom fields are for account users. So let's talk first about document custom fields. So as I mentioned, document custom fields are basically just manipulated versions of standard fields. You can create them in the exact same way, and you can share a custom field with other users on your account. And you'll see they appear in your fields palette right alongside of your standard fields. Now, individual users or non-admins can also create custom fields, but they will not have the ability to share them with other users. Admins, on the other hand, of course, can create and share fields. Envelope custom fields, on the other hand, are just going to be seen by your senders on your account, and they're helpful to allow you to classify the envelopes that you're sending based off of school or department or region. You can also search by envelope custom fields. So if you're looking in your inbox or your manage tab, you can search based off of a custom field value. And you can pull custom fields into reporting as well to help you track different information. So again, these fields are visible to senders when they are creating envelopes, not to recipients. You can mark them as required or optional during the sending process for your senders to fill out, and they'll be shown on the certificate of completion for the envelope. Now, there are two different types of envelope custom fields that you can create: a text field, which just allows for free text to be inputted, or a drop-down list of values. So we'll see both of these in a moment. So let's take a look at creating a document custom field and an envelope custom field. Coming back into my settings, I'm going to go back to my account here. And let me log into my account, not Anne. There we go. To create a custom field as an admin, I'm going to go to the settings page. And from here on the side menu, I'm going to select document custom fields. So let's say that at our school, we're sending out some athletics documentation for maybe sporting tickets, and we want the spectator or the alumni or whomever is signing to tell us what sport they're looking to purchase tickets for. And we want to list out all of the sports that we offer. Instead of somebody having to recreate that field every time it needs to be added to a template or a document, I can create it once as a document custom field. So here I can select add field and give it a name. So I'm going to call this ABC University Sports Team. What type of field is it? I can choose from any of those standard field types. So in this case, I might want to do a drop-down list. I can add all of my fields. So maybe I'll say soccer, football, basketball, volleyball, and maybe tennis. And of course, we could continue listing out. Each option's separated by a semicolon. I can mark this field as required if I want it to be marked as required when it gets added to a document or to a template. I can share it with other users on my account. And then at the bottom, I can just click save. So now I have this new field, ABC University Sports Team. It is a drop-down menu and it's shared, meaning it can be accessed by other users. Now, before we go through and we create an envelope, let's create an envelope custom field. So I'm going to go to envelope custom fields on the menu. And for this, I want to be able to create a field for different departments at my school. I want to be able to track who from which department or which department is creating the most envelopes or which department has the most transactions, if you will. So I can create a field for envelope custom field, and I can call it ABC University Department. I can make it shown to envelope creators so that they have the option to fill it out. And I can even make it required if I absolutely want to collect that information. I can choose text or list. So in my case, maybe I'll do a list because we have a finite number of departments. So I'll do HR, IT, admissions, maybe finance. And I could continue, maybe athletics is the last one. So now I have this envelope custom field that will be shown to my senders during the sending process. So let's see that all together. I'm going to go back to my home page. I'll click Start, Send an Envelope. I'll add in a document. I'll just do the NDA document again. I'll add a recipient. Maybe I'll call this person Abby Alumni. I'll plug in her email. Now scrolling down right away, right before the messaging, I have to pick my envelope custom field because I made it required for my senders. So what department am I from? Well, I'm going to be from athletics. Scrolling through, I can customize the subject line. Maybe I want this to say season ticket renewal, ABC University. I'll go ahead and click next. And obviously I know this isn't a season ticket renewal. We can just pretend. Scrolling down, I can go ahead and add some fields for Abby. So maybe I want her to sign. And I also want her to choose what sport team she's looking to renew for. So here I can see all of my standard fields, but I can get to my custom fields by clicking this little wrench icon on the left. And what do we know? ABC University sports team is an option. I'll drag it onto the page. And here I can see all of my teams already listed. Now, if I were a regular user or a non-admin user, I could create a custom field right here for my own personal use. It's the same process. The only thing that's different is they will not see the option to share it with other users. So I'm going to send it to Abby. Abby's going to get an email. Season ticket renewal. Abby will go ahead and click review. Notice nowhere does she see that custom field for athletics. She's only going to see the document custom field for a team. So maybe she's looking for football tickets. She'll sign and we'll finish. So now if I go to the back end of my account, let's talk about the benefit of the custom fields. Well, first, if I were to click into the envelope that we just sent to Abby, which should now be marked as completed. Inside of the envelope, I can see the envelope custom field, which department is this for? Athletics. I can also see that information on the certificate of completion. If I go to download here and download the certificate, and I open it up, it's a PDF. If I zoom in here for you all, right at the top, we see ABC University Department, Athletics. So that envelope custom field is going to be shown in a few places. Additionally, if I were to just come to my manage inbox, remember we can search by envelope custom fields. So maybe I'm looking for all of my football related envelopes. If I search football and choose include envelope custom fields, Abby's envelope will, oops. Oh, envelope custom fields, my bad. So this was athletics. It's been a long day for me. If I click apply, now I'll see Abby's envelope. So I'm searching based off of envelope custom field, which remember was department. So I could have typed in HR, IT, athletics, admissions, finance, whatever my values are. Remember, we can also pull in custom fields into reports, and we'll talk more about reports in a later section. Let's talk now about payment gateways. So DocuSign does have a payment feature, which allows you to collect payment or save payment during the signing process from your recipients. So you could use this for a variety of different reasons, even donations, for example. We'll see how it's set up here in just a moment. So what happens is you'll need to first set up a payment gateway first outside of DocuSign using one of our compatible providers. Once you have the payment gateway set up, you'll need to connect your DocuSign account and your payment gateway account in your admin settings. Then once that's connected, you can add the payment item field to any of your templates or your regular envelopes that you send. So the DocuSign payments feature is available globally, and we do have an extensive list of currencies and countries that are supported by each of our payment gateways in the support site if you're curious. But what I want to show you is first where you can go to set up a payment gateway and how you can sign an envelope with payments. So I'm going to pull up my account again. And if I wanted to set up a payment gateway, I can do that in my admin settings. From the side navigation, I'll scroll down to payments under integrations. And here I don't have any payment gateways set up yet. So I can click add a payment gateway. And here I can choose from any of our providers. Again, it's a very simple process. So for example, maybe we work with authorized.net. I could select that option and I'll be taken to the authorized.net page to plug in my credentials. No integration or coding required. I'm just going to go back. Now, once you have a payment gateway enabled, you can add a payment item field to a template or to a document. So if I go to my home page, and I'm just going to send out another envelope here. I'll use our NDA document again, and I'll just plug in a recipient's name, for example, Diane. Now, if I go to the next page tab, oops, forgot my custom field was required. If I go to the next page, here I can add my fields. And one of the field types that you can add is the payment item field. If I add the payment item field to the page, here are all of the settings that I can customize. And obviously it is prompting me to plug in my payment gateway, which I did not set up, so I won't be able to fully execute this. But just to express some of the customizations, you can choose to collect payment or process payment or save a payment method for future. You can choose what the payment amount is. Is it a fixed amount? Is it a formula, which is based off of other fields that were entered on the document? Or is it signer entered, which would be ideal, obviously, for donor scenarios? You can also assign certain metadata to the payment that would ultimately pass over to the payment gateway. Now, I know I don't have a gateway, so I can't fully go through this, but I do have a power form that was set up before class that does have payment added, so you can see exactly how it would go. So I'm going to pull up that power form link in my browser. So this is a sample power form, and it is an invoice. You'll see when this loads, I'll be prompted to enter in what items I want to purchase. I don't know why this is taking so long. Really thinking today. Let me try in an incognito window and see if that helps. Give it a minute, and if it doesn't load, it's not the end of the world. It basically is just explaining how you can, set it up so that way people can type in a certain number for a certain product that they want, and it's demonstrating the calculated field or the formula field option where it will automatically calculate a value, and then we would be prompted to pay before we finish signing. Unfortunate that that's not loading for me today. Not sure what the issue is. I'll try one more time. Yeah, apologies. Again, not the end of the world. It was just a simulation of how that payment item would work in real time. But one key thing that I want to mention with the payment item is the payment will not actually be processed until everyone on the envelope has signed. So if you have one person, that's great, they'll type it in and it'll be processed right away. But if there are other people further along in the signing order that need to sign, the payment will not go through until everyone has completed the process. So just important to note there. So we'll go ahead and move into retention, reporting, and automation. Before I do that, I want to pause and just see if there are any questions that I can answer. Sorry for the long pause, just taking a drink of water. I did the same training this morning, so I'm like needing some water. All right, not seeing anything. We'll go ahead and move on then. So in this section, we'll talk about document retention policies. We'll discuss reporting and auditing on your account. And then we'll talk finally about some ways to automate your account through agreement actions or DocuSign Connect. So with document retention, by default, documents are going to be kept in your account for as long as, till the end of time. Nothing is going to be deleted or purged from your DocuSign account by default. Now, optionally, you can choose to set up a retention policy so that for any completed, declined, or voided envelopes, they'll automatically be removed from the account after a certain number of days that you specify. So you can enable the retention policy. You can enter in a specific number of days, anywhere from 1 up to 999 or 9,099, I believe. We'll test it when we go in. And then once that number of days has been hit, your document will be moved to the retention or to the purge queue. It will sit in the purge queue for 2 weeks at that point. And then after the 14th day, or when the 2 weeks are up, the document will be permanently removed from the purge queue. So once the document is moved into the purge queue, you as the sender will be notified, as well as any of your recipients on that envelope. So that way they can go in and download any documents that they might need before it is officially purged. They'll also get a reminder 7 days into it being into the purge queue, again, for them to know to go in and grab anything they need before it's permanently removed. Now, a sub option here is available to remove any fields and metadata from the envelope, as well as redact any personally identifiable information. So in this case, DocuSign would just remove any PII or personally identifiable fields and just leave it with a blank space. And then for any fields and metadata, it would just remove that. You would still be able to see when something occurred, but nothing would be tied to a specific individual. So this is important to bring up, especially in the times that we live in, where privacy is definitely top of mind for a lot of folks, especially, for example, with GDPR over in the European Union, you might have somebody who's requesting to be forgotten, to have their data removed. You can always set up a retention policy if you want that to happen automatically after a certain number of days. Or if it's maybe just a one-off instance that you need to purge something, there is something called a targeted purge that you can execute. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. We'll also look at reporting. So in DocuSign eSignature, there are a variety of pre-configured reports that you can run. We have reports on your envelope data, reports on recipient data, and reports on account usage. So you can always click into each of these reports or each of these categories to see pre-configured reports. You can customize the reports to include fields or filtering that fits your needs. And you can even schedule a report to go out to a certain party, for example, yourself or even someone external on a recurring basis. Now, as a note, if you are an administrator, you are going to have access to data in reports from across the account. Versus if you are a non-admin and you're running a report, you're only going to see your own data for the envelopes that you have control over. So that's an important thing to distinguish. We'll take a look at the value calculator as well. The value calculator is a helpful tool that you can use in DocuSign Admin that basically allows you to calculate current and potential value for your DocuSign investment. So what happens is you can set up certain parameters, for example, your industry, what type of use case you're looking to use, how aggressive your approach will be, and DocuSign will automatically calculate things like cost savings, productivity improvement, and revenue gain. So the value calculator is really just going to pull in data that we've accrued from or aggregated from other customers. It's not data that's specific to your account. You would be able to get that more so from reporting. But the value calculator could be helpful if you maybe have a business unit at your school that is perhaps not sure if DocuSign is right for their use cases. Maybe they're hesitant. You can show them, hey, typically with, a back-end use case like this, with an aggressive approach, you might see XYZ minutes saved in productivity, for example. So I'll show you where to go to pull up that value calculator. We also have the audit logs. So any change that you make in your admin settings, whether that be to a particular setting or a field or a value, that's all going to be captured in your audit logs. And as an admin, that's a big relief, right? You don't want to have, no way to track when a change was made or who made a change. You can always pull up the logs to see that information. And in some cases, you can even see old and new values, which makes reverting back to a previous value really easy. So in the audit logs, you'll be able to see up to 1,000 events at a given time, and you can specify a date range, so when you're exactly looking for certain changes. And if necessary, you can even export the audit logs to an Excel file or a spreadsheet file. So I'll show you how to access reporting, the value calculator, and the audit logs. Back in DocuSign, that power form really didn't want to load. Let me go to my account. Let's see here, I've got too many tabs open. I think it's this one. Yes, or no, not this one. This one. Yes. Okay, back in DocuSign, let's go up to our admin settings again. And before I get to reports, value calculator, and audit log, let me show you the retention policy. So from settings, I'll scroll down to document retention. And this is where I can set up a retention policy. Again, I don't have one right now, but if I did, I could type in the number of days. And I believe the limit is 9,999. Yeah, okay, that worked. So yes, this is the limit, because I think if I were to type 10,000, it won't let me do it. So it has to be somewhere between 1 and 9,999. Again, by default, that's turned off. Your documents will not move into a purge queue after a certain number of days. They'll be kept in your account indefinitely. And then remember, you can always do a targeted purge if you're looking to purge a single envelope, on its own. You don't want to go with what's set up in your policy. You can go to targeted purge, use the filters to find an envelope of your choosing, and then add it to the purge queue where it will remain for 14 days prior to being completely removed from the system. Let's now take a look at the value calculator. So from the account section here in admin, I'll select value calculator. I can choose my industry. So higher education is one of them. So I'll keep that selected. I have my back office use case. For certain industries, different use cases are available. For example, if I selected technology, I could choose front office versus back office. But for university or for higher education, back office is the only one that's available. What type of approach do I want to have? Conservative, moderate, or aggressive? As I change these metrics around, the metrics down below will update. So maybe we're going to go with an aggressive approach. We can see that our savings per document is around $3.15. Productivity per document, we're saving 38 minutes, roughly $10.92 of time. And then revenue gains per document is marked as NA. But again, this data will update depending on the items that you select above. Down below, you can also do a estimated monthly usage for envelopes. How many envelopes do you imagine that you'll send in a month? Maybe I think we'll spend about 100 envelopes in a month. That's going to save me roughly $1,400, which equates to around $16,800 per year. So again, this is all just based off of aggregated customer data in that same business category, for example, higher education. This is not going to pull your information specifically. And if you don't see this value calculator in your account, you can always reach out to DocuSign support to get it added. We'll also take a look at our reports now. So from the top, we'll select reports. And here we'll be taken to a reports overview page where we can see some quick statistics about how DocuSign is helping the environment. We can also see some quick stats about our account. Again, because I'm an admin, I have the ability to see data from across the account versus if I were a non-admin user running reports, I would only see my activity. I can see an envelope status breakdown, completion rate, envelope velocity, so how quickly my envelopes turned around and got all of the signatures after being sent, the volume of envelopes that have been sent. To run a report, I can look at the categories here on the side. So I can run reports on envelope data, recipient data, or account usage. If I click on envelope, for example, you'll see all of the preset reports here with the description underneath. So maybe I want to run the envelope report. If I click view, before I click run report, I can make adjustments to the date range. So right now I'm only looking at envelopes that were sent month to date, which has only been about 7 days. So maybe I want to go ahead and look at last month, the last 30 days. I can update the filtering. So if I click edit filters, right now I'm looking at envelopes in any status, but maybe I only want to look at envelopes that are completed, for example. I can look for envelopes that were sent to specific recipients or contain specific subject line, or even something or even a specific envelope custom field value. I can also filter based off of who sent the envelope, whether that be specific users or specific groups. So maybe I'm only curious about envelopes that were sent by people in athletics. I'm going to leave it at any right now. Once I click done, I'm going to go ahead and click run report. And here I can see the information. So as the subject line of each envelope, the status, who the sender was, who the recipients were, when it was sent, when it was completed. Scrolling over to the right, I can even see completion time. Most of my completion times are pretty short just because I'm usually sending to myself in a training and signing right away. But obviously you would see more variance here or variety here. Now, if I wanted to save this report as a custom report, I can click Save As at the top, and I can give it a name. So maybe I want to call this Completed Envelopes Within Last Month. I can click Save, and now I can access this report as is later and not have to go through and make those edits again. To access my custom reports, I could go to reports and then custom. And then here I can see completed envelopes within the last month, and I can easily run that again. Now, in addition to saving a report as a custom report, there are also some actions over here that you can take. You can download a CSV file with all of the report's contents if you need to export the report, basically. I can send this report to someone else right now. If I click send now, I can determine if I want to send it to myself or others, and then I can type their email address in. This would just allow me to basically send the CSV with the data to another person of my choosing. So maybe my boss wants to see how many, deals I've closed within the past month, or how many, tuition papers I was able to get through in the past month. I can delete this custom report if I no longer need it, or I can schedule a report to be sent on a recurring basis. So as opposed to me clicking send now, which would send the report right here, right now, I can schedule it to be sent recurring. Daily, weekly, month, or monthly, or once, when it's going to be sent. So maybe I want to do it weekly, every Tuesday. When will it start? So maybe this Tuesday or next Tuesday, which would be the 13th, the 14th. And I wanted to go through, you can go 365 days from the start date. Who do you want to send to, yourself or others? And then again, of course, typing in their email. And you can give it a subject. So maybe I want to say weekly completion report. And again, this just sends an email with the CSV file that they can download without having to log into DocuSign. Now, I want to quickly just run this report again because I want to mention that we can pull our document custom fields into the report. So to edit the columns, I can click Edit Columns, and here I can choose all of the columns that I could potentially pull in. And maybe I want to pull in Envelope Custom Field. If I click Done and then Run Report to see the changes, I'll be able to see if I scroll over all the way to the far side, any custom fields that were added. So it looks like for this one, it was sent from Department Human Resources. So again, you can pull that information into your reports that you run. Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and click out of here. And we'll go back up to settings. Actually, before we do that, you know what? Let me go in and I'll also show you the group activity report, just because I think people like to see that. So back in reports, there were some usage reports that you could run. If I click usage, one of which is the group activity report. So for your different user groups, maybe you're curious which group is using the system the most. If I click view and then run, I'll see a breakdown for each of my groups, how many users are in each group, how many envelopes were sent, so on and so forth. So again, this will help you get a better idea of which business unit is using DocuSign the most versus which business unit maybe needs a little bit more practice or training. And of course, we can adjust our date range here. So now we'll take a look at the audit logs. If I go up to settings, I can see the log for any changes that were made in my account by going to audit logs all the way down towards the bottom under auditing. And here I can see a list of changes. Right now I'm looking at changes in the past 7 days, but I can adjust my filtering. And this is pretty granular. For example, here I can see a change I just made when I set up my retention policy to be 9,999 days. I can also see when I created a new field for document and envelope custom fields. And in some cases, you can see when I changed something or turned it on or off, there's an old value and a new value, which is helpful for reverting back if necessary. Now I can export this audit log to a CSV if needed. So coming back to our homepage, we'll go ahead and move into, I believe, our final section before our summary, and that is automation. So there are a couple of ways that you can automate actions from your account. There's agreement actions and DocuSign Connect. I'll talk through the differences here. Starting with agreement actions, these allow you to easily configure rules to automate common post-signature tasks. For example, maybe you need to archive all of your documents to a cloud storage provider. For example, DocuSign CLM, Box, Dropbox, Google, OneDrive, or SharePoint. Maybe you want to start a workflow in DocuSign CLM if you're using that product. Or maybe you need to export data to a Google Sheet. By setting up these agreement actions, you're basically able to automate these actions in the system by setting up conditions. So you can say if certain conditions are true, then these actions will occur. So in this case, if the template name is new hire offer letter, then we're going to archive to DocuSign CLM, and we're going to start a workflow in CLM. Alternatively, you can use DocuSign Connect. DocuSign Connect is a push service that basically sends real-time updates about your envelopes and recipient activity to an external application of your choosing as they progress through the signing process. DocuSign Connect is fairly flexible and customizable for developers if you have one that you work with. With DocuSign Connect, you can choose to connect to a custom application or one of our partner applications. We work with Box, Salesforce, OneDrive, or eOriginal. Again, DocuSign Connect would be set up in your admin settings. Now, what's really the difference between agreement actions and DocuSign Connect? We've outlined a few of them on the slide here, but I would also encourage you, if you're curious in any sort of automation, to bring that to a working session, and Carrie and Jesse will be able to help you identify which tactic will be best for your account. But with agreement actions, you'll want to use that in situations where you are not needing to build out a lot of code and you want to easily automate processes with clicks. Remember those if-then scenarios rather than coding. Agreement actions are also helpful when you're dealing with a lot of envelopes at once. For example, if you're using a Power Form, which remember those are self-service and have the potential to capture a lot of responses, or if you don't have the budget or development resources for Connect. You can use Connect in a situation where your application needs to react to DocuSign events in real time. For example, notifying someone when an envelope is complete. It's also helpful if you need to start a workflow within an internal system or a third-party system when a specific event happens. You might want to archive documents from a completed envelope to a custom location. Or if you have a development resource that can help you set up a custom listener. So if you have someone on your team that can really get into the API details and set that up, that would be helpful for Connect. So again, if you are curious in any sort of automation, I definitely encourage you to bring that to Carrie and Jesse. They'll be able to talk you through what might be best for your account and put you in the right direction. But with that, we do have a couple more slides that I want to go through before we get to Q&A. Let me just progress through this. There's some knowledge checks that you can refer back to in the deck after class when you get it sent to you to test your knowledge. But I first want to mention that we have a survey that will be sent after class in the follow-up email with the training deck and the recording. So you'll be able to fill that out and give us your candid feedback about the course. And myself as a trainer, we always use that feedback to make improvements to our content so that it can be better for the next customers that are going through. So really appreciate any and all responses that you have. Additionally, we've gone ahead and curated some extra links here. So these are some helpful links that you can refer back to on some of the more popular topics that we talked about today. We also have a link for you to go to the support site so that you can search for other articles based off of your questions. And as you take away from today's class and you go into your demo account and start looking at these admin settings, be sure to jot down any questions that come up or that you have, and you can bring those to your working sessions with Carrie and Jesse. Do remember though, that because you are working in a shared demo account, any changes that you make could potentially impact other users on the account. So just be sure to be aware of that. Remember, you can always go to the audit logs and see who changed something or potentially revert back to a previous setting. Now, as a reminder, we have finished our foundational trainings. Coming up next will likely be some working sessions that get scheduled with Carrie and Jesse. Optionally, we do have an API overview course that we can get scheduled with your school if you want to learn more about setting up an API connector with DocuSign and another application. And we do have some more advanced offerings that go more in depth on templates, advanced recipient workflows, and advanced features. If you're curious about getting those scheduled, those training sessions would also take place with me. But we'll go ahead and pause here just to see if there are any questions. I'm glad we were able to finish on time. I know we were a little bit worried about that at the beginning, but I'm happy to answer anything that comes up, but we're also, of course, happy to give you back the gift of time. I know this course is a lot of information. Believe me, I feel it too. It's just one of those things where perhaps looking back at the deck after class will help you maybe to realize what questions you do have or what settings you want to review more in depth before working sessions.
Jesse, how long is the API course?
I'm going to divert that to Carrie, actually.
It's a 2-hour session, Terry.
2 hours. Okay.
One of our seniors, It's a 2-hour session, and it's also very interactive. One of our senior technical consultants provides information on where all of our information is located, walks through the process, answers questions along the way. If you have developers that already have questions, makes some calls, shows you how to make calls, best practices, tips and tricks, etc. So it was actually designed specifically for higher ed, just to provide much of the detail that they need to be able to take it and walk away and start coding. But you also then have a technical consultant resource if you have questions.
Is it primarily designed for developers?
It is, yes.
Okay. So for out of the box integrations, it's really not an essential piece.
No,
Okay.
out of the box integrations, generally you just need to know where the API connect area is, and I think Chessie went through that. You need to know the API username and the maybe the integration key, password, but you have all of that, so we could help with that.
Okay.
Yeah, the API overview is really more if you're interested in using REST or development, REST or SOAP APIs to automate a particular workflow because there isn't a connector already created.
Okay. Would it be beneficial for the folks, the individual departments within UCF who are wanting to do some API integrations like housing with StarRes? Would that be more of a working session then?
That would probably be a working session.
Okay, very good.
And I need to confirm, did StarRes create the connector to DocuSign? Do you know? And because DocuSign is open source, we have many other companies that create connectors to integrate with DocuSign.
I believe
so
they
did. Built them,
yeah.
Okay. And we can certainly go through a working session, but we may, depending on the questions, refer you back to StarRes because we know how DocuSign works. But StarRes, if they built the connector, they might be your first, first stop. Again, we don't want you in the middle, so we're happy to jump on a call first if you'd like, or with them too, if we need to.
This will be coming up fairly shortly. Probably, I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but our housing group is wanting to do a StarRes integration pretty quick. So more on that very soon. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You guys have been really good to stick through this with all this information. So next steps are to just confirm that your demo and or production accounts excuse me, are enabled, that the features are enabled the way you want them to be, and then schedule working sessions so that we can help you prepare. We can schedule working sessions to review the settings and just make sure, answer any last minute questions before you go live. Working session also is if you already have created templates, we can review those and provide constructive assistance. Or we start from the very beginning, review your work case or your use case and help you go live and start, or help you create it and start testing. So, so you've gotten through what I consider kind of the hard part is figuring out how to use DocuSign. Now it kind of gets to the fun part where you start really, you're sharing your screen and we're walking you through the login in the URL. Oh, sure. Let me get it. Are you talking, Hans, are you talking the login URL for demo or for production? Are you, I'm assuming, Terry and Rich, that you are for demo. Okay.
I got
Yeah.
it, Carrie. I got it for you.
Okay, perfect. I always want to just do demo.docusign.net, but thank you, Tessie. So, all right. If there are no other questions, we can let you get back to your regularly scheduled day. And as soon as I get a copy of this recorded session, I'll provide it to you, as well as the presentation deck that Chessie just provided. It's a wealth of information in there. So Rich and Terry, if you want to let me know when you're ready to schedule working sessions, I can provide our availability.
Okay.
And just as it's about 2 weeks out, so kind of factor that in, that we're scheduling about 2 weeks out now.
Okay. Understood.
The closer into holidays, it may be farther out because everybody starts wanting to get their stuff done before the holidays hit, which is already September.
Mhm.
Okay, well then, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.